Todd called the entire floor together for the Monday morning stand-up meeting. I stood near the back, coffee in hand, expecting the usual project updates and deadline reminders. Instead, he pointed directly at me. Madison Carter, he announced, his voice carrying across the silent room, is being terminated effective immediately for ongoing performance issues and poor communication with clients. The words hit me like a physical blow. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me, most looking away quickly, uncomfortable with witnessing my humiliation. My face burned hot, but I kept my expression neutral even as my hands started shaking. This wasn't a private conversation in his office. This was a public execution designed to make an example of me. Todd continued talking, using my supposed failures as a teaching moment about accountability and standards. He was performing for the crowd, acting like a decisive leader who wouldn't tolerate mediocrity. My coworkers shifted uncomfortably, a few typing suddenly urgent emails, anything to avoid looking at me. The sting of betrayal settled in my chest like a stone. Todd wasn't just firing me. He was using me to prove his authority, to show everyone else what happened when you didn't fall in line. I stood frozen, my mind racing through 4 years of late nights and saved accounts and problems I'd solved while he took credit. I was still processing the shock, trying to figure out how to exit with some dignity, when the elevator doors opened. A group of people in expensive suits stepped into the reception area, and my heart stopped. Aurora Logistics, our biggest client. The account that represented 30% of the firm's revenue. The account I had personally managed for 3 years. Their lead representative, Vanessa Torres, spotted me immediately and smiled. "Madison," she called out cheerfully, walking toward me with her hand extended. "Perfect timing. We're here for the quarterly review meeting." The room went silent. Todd's confident expression flickered, confusion crossing his face. He hadn't known they were coming today. Nobody had told him about the surprise visit that Vanessa and I had scheduled weeks ago to review the new expansion proposal. "Where's the conference room set up?" Vanessa asked, looking around. "Madison promised to walk us through today's proposal personally. We've been looking forward to this." Todd's face went pale, then flushed red. He recovered quickly, that practiced smile sliding back into place, but I saw the panic in his eyes. I stayed exactly where I was, standing by my desk with my coffee, waiting to hear what he would say. I wanted to see how he'd explain firing the one person Aurora trusted. Todd stepped forward, his hand extended to shake Vanessa's, his smile bright and fake. "Vanessa, wonderful to see you. I apologize for the confusion, but Madison recently transitioned off the Aurora account." The words came out smooth and practiced, like he'd been preparing this lie for weeks. Vanessa's eyebrows knitted together. "Transitioned? That's odd." She emailed me on Friday confirming today's presentation. She said she'd walk us through the expansion proposal personally. Her tone had shifted from friendly to suspicious. Todd waved his hand dismissively, trying to minimize the concern. "Just some internal restructuring. Nothing that affects service quality. I'll be handling your account moving forward, and I've been fully briefed on everything." He gestured toward the conference room. "Please, let's get you settled, and we can discuss the proposal." The tension in the room thickened. Vanessa looked at me, then back at Todd, clearly sensing something was wrong. Her colleagues shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. "I'd really prefer if Madison joined us," Vanessa said firmly. "We have specific questions about the financial projections she prepared." Todd's jaw tightened, but he kept smiling. Of course. Madison, please join us." He practically pushed the Aurora team toward the conference room, rushing them before they could ask more questions. I stood there for a moment, numb, watching him usher them away. Then I quietly gathered my purse and walked toward the elevator. I was done being his shield. My name is Madison Carter, and 4 years earlier, I had walked into this firm fresh out of graduate school, eager and optimistic. I was in my mid-20s, armed with a business degree and determination to prove myself in the competitive world of corporate consulting. Todd had interviewed me personally, charming and encouraging, telling me I was exactly what the team needed. "You're going to be my best find," he'd said, shaking my hand firmly. "I can already tell you've got what it takes." Those first months, I threw myself into the work completely. I learned every client's preferences, memorized budget details, studied industry trends late into the night. I wanted to be indispensable, to show Todd he'd been right about me. And I succeeded. My client satisfaction scores were consistently the highest on the team. My projects came in under budget and ahead of schedule. I solved problems that more senior consultants couldn't figure out. And Todd basked in all of it. Every success I achieved made him look good to upper management. Every difficult client I smoothed over reflected well on his leadership. He went from being a mid-level manager to a director in 18 months, riding on the wave of accomplishments I generated. Back then, I didn't mind. I thought we were a team. I thought my success was our success. I was naive enough to believe that loyalty and hard work would be rewarded fairly. The first red flag appeared about 18 months into my time at the firm. I had developed a cost-saving strategy for one of our manufacturing clients, restructuring their supply chain in a way that cut expenses by 15% while improving delivery times. The client was thrilled, and I documented everything carefully, preparing a presentation for our monthly board meeting. But when the meeting happened, I wasn't invited. Instead, Todd presented my strategy as his own idea. I found out from a colleague who attended, someone who congratulated me privately but looked uncomfortable doing it. When I confronted Todd afterward, he looked genuinely surprised that I was upset. "Don't make this about ego, Maddie," he said, using the nickname I'd never given him permission to use. "We're a team here. Your wins are my wins are your wins. That's how it works in consulting." He put his hand on my shoulder in what was probably meant to be a reassuring gesture, but felt patronizing. Besides, the board doesn't want to hear from junior consultants. They want leadership perspective. I'm doing you a favor by packaging your work in a way they'll actually listen to. I laughed it off, pushing down my discomfort. I told myself he had a point about corporate politics, about how things worked at this level. I still trusted him then. I still believed he had my best interests at heart. Everything changed when I landed Aurora Logistics. They were known throughout the industry as a notoriously difficult client, one that had churned through 3 consulting firms in 2 years. They demanded excellence, asked hard questions, and had zero tolerance for empty promises or corporate speak. Todd had tried to win them over for months with no success. Then I got assigned to handle their initial consultation, and something clicked. I spent hours on late-night phone calls with their operations team, genuinely trying to understand their problems rather than pushing cookie-cutter solutions. I learned their business inside and out, identified inefficiencies they hadn't even noticed, and built a proposal that actually addressed their specific needs. When they signed a 3-year contract, it was the biggest one our firm had seen in years. The CEO personally congratulated our team. Todd threw a celebration dinner and gave a speech about persistence and relationship building. He mentioned my name once, briefly, buried in a list of team members. But he was the one who got promoted. He was the one featured in the company newsletter. And slowly, deliberately, he started excluding me from client meetings. "It's about optics," he explained when I questioned him. "Clients want to see senior leadership. You understand." I didn't understand, but I didn't push back. Not yet. 6 months after landing Aurora, I discovered a discrepancy in one of their invoices. The numbers didn't match the contract terms we'd agreed to. They'd been overcharged by nearly $15,000 due to what looked like duplicate billing for consulting hours. I flagged it immediately in our internal system and brought it to Todd privately. I didn't want to embarrass him, didn't want to make it a big deal. "There's an issue with the Aurora invoice," I said, showing him the spreadsheet with the errors highlighted. "The billing got duplicated somehow. We need to correct it before they notice." Todd barely glanced at the numbers. "I'll handle it," he said dismissively, already turning back to his computer. "Don't worry about it." But he didn't handle it. Weeks passed, and I could see in the system that the invoice still hadn't been corrected. Then Vanessa called me directly, her voice tight with frustration. "Madison, can you explain this overage? We're seeing charges for hours that weren't in the original scope." My stomach dropped. Todd had told me he'd handled it, but clearly he'd done nothing. I had to make a split-second decision. Expose Todd's negligence or cover for him, and try to fix it quietly. I chose to cover, to be the team player I thought I should be. There was a clerical delay in processing the adjustment. I told Vanessa, echoing Todd's words from weeks earlier. Let me get that corrected immediately. I personally processed the credit that afternoon, saving the account but taking the blame for the clerical error in the process. Todd cornered me after that phone call, his face red with barely controlled anger. We were in the hallway outside the conference room, and he kept his voice low, but the intensity was unmistakable. You made me look unprepared in front of the client, he hissed. Don't ever contradict me or go over my head again. If a client has concerns, they come to me first. Are we clear? I stared at him, finally seeing what had been there all along. This wasn't about teamwork or optics or corporate politics. This was about control. Todd needed to be the hero, the indispensable one, the person everyone depended on. And I had become a threat to that narrative. Every client who asked for me specifically, every problem I solved that he couldn't, every time my name came up in conversations about the Aurora account, it all chipped away at his carefully constructed image. Are we clear, Madison? He repeated, his tone sharper. Crystal clear, I replied quietly. But something had shifted inside me. I wasn't angry yet, just sad and disillusioned. The mentor I'd admired, the leader I'd trusted, didn't actually exist. Todd was just a man desperately protecting his position by keeping everyone else beneath him. That realization changed everything. I started paying closer attention to how he operated, noticing patterns I'd been blind to before. The way he claimed credit, the way he shifted blame, the way he needed everyone around him to be just competent enough to make him look good, but never successful enough to overshadow him. After that confrontation, I started documenting everything. Not out of revenge or anger, but pure self-protection. I was tired of being Todd's invisible safety net, tired of saving accounts and solving problems while he took credit and threatened me when I made him look anything less than perfect. I created a detailed folder on my personal drive, backing up every email, every message, every version of documents I created. When Todd asked me to revise a proposal, I saved the original with timestamps. When he changed numbers in a budget, I kept records of what I'd actually submitted. When clients emailed me directly with questions or praise, I archived those messages. I wasn't planning anything specific. I just knew that working for someone who saw me as both an asset to exploit and a threat to contain meant I needed proof of my actual contributions. I needed evidence of my work, my relationships, my value, because I could feel something building, some inevitable confrontation that would come eventually. Todd's need for control and his resentment of my competence couldn't coexist forever. One of those forces would have to give, and I suspected he'd try to push me out long before he'd risk me continuing to outshine him. So I prepared. Quietly, methodically, without telling anyone. I became my own documentation system, my own proof of worth. Just in case. The breaking point came during the third quarter. Todd ordered me to prepare the quarterly performance proposal for Aurora, the presentation that would determine whether they renewed for another year. I spent 3 weeks building financial models, analyzing their ROI, creating projections that showed exactly how much value our partnership provided. It was solid work, maybe the best presentation I'd ever created. Then Todd announced he'd be delivering the proposal himself. I'll take it from here, he said, downloading my files without really looking at them. This is too important for junior staff. Aurora's leadership will be there. I knew immediately he wouldn't understand the financial models. They were complex, built on assumptions and industry data that required explanation. But I didn't argue. I just made sure I kept my own clean copy, with my name watermarked on every hidden tab, with notes explaining the methodology. When Todd presented to Aurora's executive team 2 weeks later, it was a disaster. He stumbled over the financial projections, couldn't answer basic questions about the calculations, contradicted himself multiple times. Vanessa called me that afternoon, her voice carefully neutral. Madison, can you walk me through these numbers? I'm having trouble understanding the assumptions Todd presented. I spent an hour on the phone explaining everything, fixing Todd's mistakes, rebuilding Aurora's confidence in the data. But I knew what was coming. Todd exploded at me the next day. We were in his office with the door closed, and he didn't bother keeping his voice down. "You sabotaged me," he screamed, slamming his hand on the desk. "You deliberately gave me bad data to make me look incompetent." I stayed calm, my voice level. "I gave you the same presentation I've given you for every quarterly review. If you didn't understand the models, you should have asked me to explain them before presenting." "Don't you dare try to turn this around," he snarled. "You wanted me to fail. You've been undermining me for months, going directly to clients, making yourself look essential. You're done, Madison. I'm reporting this to HR."
He did exactly that.
Within hours, I was called into a meeting with Human Resources to discuss the incident with the Aurora presentation. Todd had gotten there first, spinning a narrative about me providing misleading information and refusing to support his client relationship. HR asked careful questions, taking notes, their faces professionally neutral. I felt the walls closing in around me. This was it. Todd was building a case to fire me, creating a paper trail that made me look incompetent and insubordinate. By the end of that week, I knew I was being set up to fail publicly. Every mistake would be magnified. Every success would be minimized or attributed to others. Todd was preparing to push me out, and he wanted to make sure everyone understood it was my fault. That weekend, I made my decision. I was done being Todd's shield, done protecting him from his own incompetence, done letting him steal my work while blaming me for his failures. I spent Saturday and Sunday creating a comprehensive handoff file, every client interaction, every deliverable, every piece of documentation showing exactly what I'd contributed to the Aurora account over 3 years. I included email chains showing clients asking for me specifically. I included before and after metrics demonstrating the improvements I'd implemented. I included budget analyses showing the cost savings I'd generated. Everything was dated, authenticated, with clear audit trails showing my work. On Monday morning, I uploaded the entire file to our shared server where HR, upper management, and compliance could access it if needed. I titled it simply, Aurora Logistics Account Documentation, Madison Carter. My work would speak for itself. If Todd was going to destroy my reputation, I was going to make sure the truth was documented and available. Then I went to work and waited for whatever was coming next. I didn't have to wait long. The termination announcement came exactly 1 week later, on that Monday morning. Todd gathered everyone on the floor together, orchestrating the whole performance with precision. He wanted witnesses. He wanted people to see what happened when you challenged him. Madison Carter is being terminated effective immediately for ongoing performance issues and poor communication with clients, he announced, looking directly at me. The humiliation was intentional and complete. In consulting, your reputation is everything. A public firing for poor performance could end my career. People would remember the spectacle, would assume I'd done something seriously wrong. Former colleagues would distance themselves. Future employers would hear whispers. Todd knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't just firing me, he was destroying my professional credibility. I kept my face calm, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break down. My hands shook slightly as I set down my coffee, but I maintained my composure. I'd known this was coming. I'd prepared for it. And I knew something Todd didn't know. Aurora was scheduled to arrive for a surprise quarterly review in exactly 15 minutes. The meeting Vanessa and I had scheduled weeks ago, the one I'd confirmed with her on Friday. The meeting Todd knew nothing about because I'd stopped including him in my direct client communications after he'd screamed at me for undermining him. I stood by my desk, silent, watching the clock and waiting. The elevator doors opened at exactly 9:30. Vanessa Torres stepped out first, followed by 3 members of Aurora's executive team, including their CFO. They were dressed for an important meeting, carrying leather portfolios and tablets, chatting cheerfully among themselves. The moment Vanessa saw me, her face lit up. "Madison," she called out warmly, completely oblivious to the tension in the room. "Perfect timing. We're excited to see the expansion proposal." She walked toward me with her hand extended for a handshake, her colleagues following behind her. Todd's expression shifted rapidly, confusion, then recognition, then panic. He hadn't known they were coming. Nobody had told him because I'd been handling all communication with Aurora directly. The room was silent, everyone frozen, watching this scene unfold. Vanessa looked around, finally noticing the awkward atmosphere. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her smile fading slightly. "Where's the conference room set up?" "Madison promised we'd review the expansion plans this morning. We've been looking forward to this meeting for weeks." Todd stepped forward quickly, that fake smile snapping back into place. But I could see the sweat forming on his forehead, could see his mind racing to figure out how to handle this. I stayed exactly where I was, standing by my desk, waiting. I wanted to hear what lie he would tell. I wanted Vanessa to hear it too. "Vanessa, wonderful to see you," Todd said, shaking her hand with forced enthusiasm. "I apologize for any confusion. Unfortunately, there's been a significant change. Madison has just been terminated and is no longer with the firm." He said it casually, like it was a minor administrative detail rather than the bombshell it actually was. Vanessa's expression transformed instantly. The friendly warmth disappeared, replaced by cold professionalism. "Terminated? As of when?" "This morning," Todd replied, still trying to maintain his confident demeanor. "Some performance issues that needed to be addressed. But don't worry, I'll be personally handling your account moving forward. I'm fully prepared for today's meeting." The Aurora team exchanged glances. Their CFO, Marcus, stepped forward. "Todd, we specifically requested Madison for this presentation. She's the only person who understands our expansion parameters. This is completely unacceptable." Todd's smile was starting to crack. "I understand your concern, but I assure you I'm completely briefed." "No," Vanessa interrupted firmly. "This doesn't work for us. Madison is the reason we renewed our contract last year. She's the only reason we've stayed with your firm. We need her in this meeting, or we're leaving." The ultimatum hung in the air. HR representative Karen had appeared from her office, drawn by the commotion, her face pale as she realized what was happening. Todd looked between Vanessa and Karen, trapped. "Of course," he said through gritted teeth. "Madison, please join us in the conference room." It was phrased as a request, but his eyes were furious. I picked up my tablet and followed them, saying nothing. The conference room felt suffocating. Todd sat at the head of the table, trying to project authority. Vanessa and her team sat on one side, their expressions carefully neutral. I sat at the other end, as far from Todd as possible, my tablet open to the expansion proposal I'd been working on. Karen from HR lingered by the door, clearly unsure whether she should stay or leave. Marcus started the meeting by diving straight into specifics. "Madison, we've reviewed the preliminary numbers you sent over. Can you walk us through the financial projections for the Southeast expansion? Specifically, we need to understand the ROI timeline and the risk mitigation strategies." I pulled up my detailed spreadsheets, the ones I'd built over months of research and analysis. "Certainly. Based on current market conditions and your existing infrastructure, we're projecting a break-even point at 18 months with full ROI by month 30. I walked them through each assumption, each calculation, answering their questions with the kind of detail that only came from truly understanding the work. Todd sat there silently, his face getting redder. He couldn't contribute because he didn't understand any of it. He never bothered to learn the details, had always relied on me to handle the actual work while he handled the relationship. Finally, Marcus turned to Todd. "You didn't prepare any of this?" It wasn't really a question. The accusation was clear in his tone. Todd's confident smile cracked completely. "I've been overseeing Madison's work, of course, but she's been the day-to-day lead on the technical details." Todd suddenly stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Actually, I need to clarify something important." His voice was sharp, desperate. "Madison is no longer authorized to speak on behalf of this company. She's been terminated for cause, and any information she's providing should be considered compromised." The room went completely silent. Vanessa slowly set down her pen, her expression turning to ice. "Excuse me? She's no longer an employee," Todd repeated, his voice getting louder. "She shouldn't even be in this meeting. She's potentially sharing proprietary information without authorization." Marcus stood up, gathering his materials. "Then we're leaving. Immediately." Vanessa stood as well, her jaw tight with anger. Madison is the only reason we've trusted your firm. If she's gone, so are we. Consider our contract terminated effective immediately. Wait, Karen interjected, her voice higher than normal. Please, let's not make any hasty decisions. Can we schedule a meeting with upper management to discuss this? But Vanessa was already walking toward the door. We've seen enough. This company clearly doesn't value the people who actually do the work. We'll be moving our business elsewhere. She paused at the door, looking back at me. Madison, I hope you'll consider joining Aurora's internal team. We need people like you. Then they were gone, and the conference room erupted. Todd turned on me immediately. You did this. You stole that client, took proprietary data. I didn't take anything, I said calmly, still seated. Everything I showed them was authorized work I completed as your employee, all properly documented and filed. Karen held up her hand, silencing Todd's next outburst. Everyone needs to stop talking right now. Madison, please go home while we sort this out. Todd, my office. Immediately. As I gathered my things, Todd tried one more desperate play. He raised his voice so everyone in the office could hear. She took proprietary client data. She's been planning this for months, sabotaging relationships, stealing information. I pulled out my phone and opened my email, showing Karen the screen. Every file I accessed is documented here, with timestamps and authorization codes. Every email with Aurora went through official company channels. Everything I showed them today was work I completed and filed properly according to company protocol. Karen's eyes widened as she scrolled through the evidence. Todd, my office. Now. I walked past my desk, past my former coworkers who were all staring, and headed for the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw Todd following Karen toward HR, his face purple with rage. My phone was already buzzing with messages. One from Vanessa. Call me when you're ready. We're serious about that job offer. I went home, poured myself a glass of wine at 11 in the morning, and waited for whatever came next. For the first time in 4 years, I felt something close to peace. I'd told the truth. I'd done everything right. Now, it was out of my hands. Corporate compliance called me the next morning. A formal investigation had been launched into irregularities in the Aurora Logistics account management. They asked me to stay home while they reviewed documentation, promising I'd be paid during the investigation period. I spent that week in a strange limbo, sleeping late and watching terrible daytime television. Every few hours, I'd check my phone compulsively, waiting for news. Todd's assistant, Hannah, texted me privately. He's been in meetings with corporate all week. Legal's involved. Everyone's talking about it. Then, on Friday afternoon, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Madison, this is Vice President Harrison from Accounts. Thank you for your transparency and cooperation during this review. His voice was formal but not unkind. We've verified all your documentation. The investigation is ongoing, but we wanted you to know that no action will be taken against you. In fact, we'd like to discuss your return to the firm. My hands shook as I held the phone. What about Todd? I can't discuss personnel matters regarding other employees, Harrison replied carefully. But the issues we've discovered extend beyond the Aurora situation. Thank you for maintaining such thorough records. It's been invaluable to our review. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment, processing relief and fear in equal measure. I'd been vindicated, but I also knew what this meant. Todd had been caught. The full story emerged over the following week through a combination of official communications and office gossip. Todd had been summoned to corporate headquarters on Monday. By Tuesday, rumors were spreading about financial misrepresentation and falsified reports. By Wednesday, HR had confirmed what my documentation had revealed. Todd had been systematically altering invoice figures, inflating his billable hours, and taking credit for work completed by others. My Aurora documentation had triggered a deeper audit of all his accounts. They found a pattern spanning 3 years. He'd been overcharging clients, manipulating budget reports, and building his promotion case on fabricated metrics and stolen work. The firm had been paying him bonuses based on performance he hadn't actually achieved. By Friday, Todd was quietly terminated for cause. No public announcement, No dramatic confrontation, just a brief email informing the team that he was no longer with the company and that interim leadership would be announced shortly. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Heard the news. Are you okay? Aurora's offer still stands. We've formally requested you on any future contract, wherever you end up. I stared at that message for a long time. Corporate wanted me back. Aurora wanted to hire me. For the first time in my career, I had real choices. I had power. And I realized something important. I didn't want to go back to that firm. I didn't want to work somewhere that had let Todd operate unchecked for years, that had enabled his behavior until I'd forced their hand with undeniable proof. Harrison called me again on Monday morning with a formal offer. Madison, we'd like you to return as senior account manager with a 25% raise and direct oversight of the Aurora relationship. We're also prepared to offer additional performance bonuses and a guaranteed promotion track. I listened politely while he outlined the package. Better title, more money, official recognition of my contributions. Everything I'd wanted 4 years ago, when I first started. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully. But I'm exploring something different right now. I need some time to consider my options. The silence on the other end told me he hadn't expected that response. I understand this has been difficult, Harrison said slowly. But we're committed to making this right. Is there something else we could offer? I'll let you know by the end of the week, I replied, keeping my voice steady. The power had shifted completely. They needed me more than I needed them. After we hung up, I called Vanessa. Tell me about this internal position you mentioned. We talked for an hour. Aurora wanted to build their own strategic accounts team rather than relying on external consultants. They wanted someone who understood their business deeply, who could work directly with operations rather than through a third party. They were offering triple my old salary, full creative control, and equity in the company. We trust you, Madison, Vanessa said simply. That's worth more than any consultant could ever provide. I accepted on the spot. 3 days later, I sent my formal decline to Harrison, thanking him professionally but firmly for the opportunity. My first day at Aurora felt like stepping into a completely different world. Instead of playing politics and fighting for credit, I was welcomed as an essential part of the team. My ideas were heard. My work was valued. My name was on everything I created. Vanessa introduced me to the executive team as the strategist who's going to help us expand into 3 new markets. Not as someone's assistant, not as junior staff, as a leader in my own right. Todd's name never came up in any conversation. Not in whispered gossip. Not in cautionary tales, not even in passing reference. He'd been erased from the narrative completely, and I realized that was the most fitting revenge of all. He'd spent his career desperately trying to be remembered, to be essential, to be the hero of every story. Instead, he'd been quietly removed and forgotten within weeks. I, on the other hand, was building something new, something real. I was no longer someone's invisible support system. I was the architect of my own success, and everyone could see it. 3 months into the job, our Southeast expansion launched successfully. 6 months in, I was promoted to Director of Strategic Growth. A year later, I was presenting our success story at an industry conference, talking about innovative approaches to market expansion. The auditorium was packed, and in the back row, I saw a familiar face that made my breath catch. Todd, looking disheveled and uncomfortable, sitting among the crowd. He wasn't presenting. He wasn't networking. He was just another attendee watching from the shadows. After my presentation ended to enthusiastic applause, I stepped down from the stage to field questions from interested companies. In the chaos of networking and business card exchanges, I felt someone hovering at the edge of the group. I glanced over and saw Todd, waiting nervously, clearly wanting to speak to me, but unsure if he should approach. When the crowd finally thinned, he stepped forward. Madison, he said, his voice subdued. That was an excellent presentation. I looked at him fully for the first time since that meeting in the conference room. He looked older, worn down. His expensive suit had been replaced with something cheaper. His confident swagger was gone. Thank you, I replied politely, neutrally. I hear you're consulting now, he asked, gesturing vaguely. For a small vendor. Nothing like Aurora, of course, but it's work. He paused, seeming to struggle with what to say next. I wanted to apologize.
For everything.
I was threatened by your success, and I handled it terribly. You didn't deserve what I did. The apology hung between us. Part of me had imagined this moment for so long, what I'd say, how I'd make him understand the pain he'd caused. But standing there, I felt nothing but indifference. I appreciate you saying that, I said simply. Then I turned back to the conversation I'd been having before he interrupted, effectively dismissing him. He lingered for another moment, then walked away. I didn't watch him go. That evening, I had dinner with Vanessa and Marcus to celebrate the conference success. Over wine and excellent food, Vanessa raised her glass. To Madison, she said warmly. The person who taught us that loyalty matters more than contracts. And that quality work speaks louder than empty promises, Marcus added. We clinked glasses, and I felt something shift inside me, a final release of the anger and hurt I'd been carrying for so long. Todd had taught me something valuable, even if he'd never intended to. He'd taught me that loyalty without respect is just submission. That being good at your job isn't enough if you're working for someone who sees you as a threat rather than an asset. That sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing. What are you thinking about? Vanessa asked, noticing my expression. Just how different my life is now, I replied honestly. A year ago, I was terrified and humiliated, wondering if my career was over. Now I'm doing work I actually care about for people who actually value me. His loss, Marcus said simply. Absolutely his loss. We spent the rest of the evening discussing our next expansion phase, planning strategies and timelines. Work that mattered, with people who respected me. It was everything I'd wanted for years ago but hadn't known how to ask for. As I walked back to my hotel later that night, I thought about that Monday morning when Todd had announced my termination in front of everyone. I thought about how humiliated and powerless I'd felt. And I smiled. 6 months later, I was leading Aurora's expansion team through our most successful quarter yet. My name was on every presentation, every proposal, every success story. The firm where I'd spent 4 years had been acquired by a larger company and rebranded completely. Todd's legacy there had been entirely erased. I still kept that documentation folder, though I hadn't opened it in months. It sat on my hard drive as a reminder, not of revenge, but of the importance of knowing your own worth and being able to prove it. One afternoon, Hannah, Todd's former assistant, reached out to me. She'd left the consulting firm and was looking for new opportunities. We met for coffee, and she told me what it had been like after I'd left. Everyone knew you were the one holding things together, she said. When you left and took Aurora with you, it became obvious how much Todd had been coasting on your work. People started asking questions. That's when everything unraveled. Do you ever hear from him? I asked, more curious than concerned.
She shook her head.
Last I heard, he's doing freelance work, struggling to rebuild. The termination for cause follows him everywhere. I felt a brief flicker of something. Not quite pity, but an acknowledgement of how completely his world had collapsed. Then I remembered his face as he'd publicly humiliated me, as he'd screamed that I'd sabotaged him, as he'd tried to steal credit for years. He announced my end, I said quietly, more to myself than to Hannah. Right before my beginning.